Joining us is Dan Yergin, Vice Chairman of S&P Global. Dan, I can't wait to come out and see you in this conference. It's always been maybe the preeminent energy conference in the world, but now you've got all these companies that we just showed, Microsoft, Amazon, and more. Why has the conference expanded so much this year that Larry Fink is coming?
Well, I think, Brian, it's partly what you're saying about the economy. It's also because infrastructure is such a big issue now. And I think it's also because this CERAWeek is going to be big tech meets the energy industry. And I mean, not only oil and gas, but renewables. And even we have fusion on the agenda in a prominent way. So I think there's a sense that it's a very consequential CERAWeek. It's a very consequential time for energy and a very big focus on it.
Yeah, it is. You've got Amazon, like I said, Microsoft. They're the customers. They're some of the ones that want to... And what Ruth Porat we showed there, because they're the ones that are buying up a lot of the energy, nuclear power plants that might or might not be sort of restarted. They might be some of the customers as well. But at the same time, Dan, we can't ignore the political backdrop, and we won't, which is what happens to the Inflation Reduction Act. Let's remember, we could talk about wind and solar. They're critical parts of the energy mix because I've heard a guy named Dan Yergin say we're going to need it all.
Well, I think that's right. And the Inflation Reduction Act was agnostic or ecumenical. It had something for everybody, including carbon capture, which is a big issue. So on top of everything else you've said, is their sense of uncertainty. So one of the big, I think that this CERAWeek will be an opportunity to say, well, what is this energy dominance mean? What does it mean in terms of implementation, in terms of what's there already and what's going to be in the future? Because it's like the whole chessboard is being rearranged.
What do you think about the federal funding freeze? And I ask this because there was a story in the Denver Post, for example, and they talk about how the federal funding freeze is stalling energy-related projects across Colorado. It's a policy aspect to energy that we don't normally think of as having as much of an impact. But for a system that's already kind of struggling with some bureaucracy and getting permits approved, we hear that all the time from infrastructure investors. How is that playing a role?
Well, I think it's still very early to answer that, but you've certainly pointed out that one of the other big issues that's there, and that's part of what that national energy emergency that President Trump declared is about the permitting imbroglio, that it just takes too long or it takes forever to get things done. And that's true whether you're talking about oil and gas, whether you're talking about pipelines, whether you're talking about wind and solar, and getting that fixed has to be a priority to ensure that we have the energy supply, particularly when we have this AI data center boom coming that has just changed the outlook for electric power needs in the United States.
And I think that's the reason that we're seeing the Microsofts and the Amazons and the Googles and many, many others coming to Houston next week for this conference, right, Dan? Because they need to figure out, the numbers are really staggering. And you literally wrote, I would say the book, but you've written multiple books on the topic. We can say things, Dan, like, well, Oracle's thinking about a 1 gigawatt data center. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. A gigawatt, but when I say Oracle's thinking about building a data center that would use as much power as 750,000 average-sized homes, now you got my attention.
Yeah, well, we're looking at it within 5 years, data centers could be 10 or 12% of total U.S. electricity demand. And so when the tech companies came to CERAWeek before, it was mainly about what they could do to improve the productivity and efficiency of energy companies. Now they're coming because they are in a way really defining to a considerable degree the future of electric power in the United States, and they have to figure out their cultures and their timeframes is very different from that of the energy industries. And so how do you get the power in place and not stress out the system? And who's going to invest in and which technologies and what are the supply chain issues? So it's really a process of discovery for the tech companies, discovering that they're that they have to look at power in a very different way.